Welcome to our second to last session of Groves. I hope you've had a great semester so far and that you're really enjoying the series as we look at 1st and 2nd Peter and 1st, 2nd, 3rd John, a fisherman's guide to overcoming evil. Today we're going to be talking about something which, we just came off of From Hunger to Hope, and I hope you guys had a great weekend. I hope you had some practical application, almost like we talked about last Sunday, where Jesus sends out the disciples on this short-term mission trip to go out there, and we kind of did the same thing. We got out of the classroom, got out of the theater at North Gwinnett High School, and actually got to serve and pack meals, and I hope that was a meaningful experience for you and your family. And maybe you're sitting there wondering, like, why is Aaron so frumpy? Why is he all dirty? And why is he all gross and disgusting? And if you we had smell-o-vision, yeah, you could smell that. And it's because what I'm talking about today, I think, is going to relate to what John is saying. You see, John, like I've been saying, is in his old age, and he's kind of like the old grandpa. And I just kind of picture him like looking at the church as his children and kind of saying, hey, I'm like coming to the end of my race, and what do I want to share with you? And it kind of reminds me of the movie City Slickers. Remember that one where they have like the one thing? And I think John's like, man, if I could boil it all down, what are the main things that I want to get across to you? And you can see it on my shirt, and if you've read ahead in 1 John, it's kind of this constant theme he's talking about, and that's to love, and to love one another, and it's love in action. And the way I kind of put it, and I think we should make t-shirts about this, but to me, love means getting dirty. And John talks about that. He says, hey, if you love, don't just love with your words, don't just love with your mouth, don't just love with your tongue. He says you got to love in action, you got to love in truth. And so to me, that's kind of a nice way of saying, love is dirty. Love is getting into the dirt and getting into the grime and getting dirty and kind of getting into the mess. And so that's kind of why I love what we did this past weekend with From Hunger to Hope, is that we got to put love and put into action and saw love get messy. Love gets a little stinky, it works. It's effort. It takes time and effort and commitment. And I like what John's going to say in today's reading. I think you're going to enjoy it because he talks about a lot of things, and there's a lot of great things we could talk about. But he's going to talk a lot about that same word we talked about last week in Groves, meno, which he just keeps using over and over and over and over again, which means to remain, to abide, to stay, to live in. And he's going to get to the end of chapter 3, and we're going to be going all the way through chapter 3 in your Groves today. But he gets to the very, very end, and he says this in verse 23 of chapter 3. And this is his command. It's like, if I had to just everything that you need to know, here's the command that you need to know. To believe in the name of his Son, Jesus Christ, and to love one another as he commanded us. The one who keeps God's commands lives in him, abides in him, remains in him, stays in him, and he in them. And this is how we know that he lives in us. And he's kind of making this argument that, how do you tell the people who are really the sons and daughters of God? And he says the evidence that you should be able to see in their lives is that they love like Jesus loved. That they love willing to get dirty, willing to be active, willing to get smelly, willing to get into the dirt and kind of just get sweaty and get into it. And so to me, I just love this idea because it's saying those who live in him, who abide in him, who remain in him, they're going to be the people that love. And they're like, that's what Jesus commanded us. And that's why John says, this is the command that Jesus gave us. You think all the way back to Matthew 22. Jesus gives the greatest commandments, to love the Lord your God with all your heart, soul, mind, strength, right? And he says the second is like it, to love your neighbor as yourself. And he says that's what it all comes down to. John, 60 years later, is like, here's what it all comes down to, people. It's the same command that Jesus gave us, which is to love. Love God and love each other, and love not just with your words, but love in action. And so I think as we kind of get to the end of our series, how do you overcome evil with good? How do you do it? And John would tell us, here's the command. You got to go all the way back to the original command that Jesus gave us, and you can't let go of this, and that is that we have got to love, not just with lip service, but in reality. We got to love in action. We got to love in truth. And so that's kind of what I just want to plant this thought in your head, because you're going to be unwrapping chapter 3. But just keep in mind that this is John, again, just encouraging us, challenging us, like, hey, if you're going to overcome evil with good, you have got to love. You got to love. And he says the evidence that you're the legitimate sons and daughters of God is that you will love. And if you don't love, then he's kind of like, well, what does that mean? That means you're probably not remaining in Jesus. You're not abiding in Jesus. You're not walking with Jesus. The evidence that we should see in our lives is over time, over the decades, throughout our lives, we should become, as believers, as followers of Jesus, more and more loving in action. And that's why I love, again, this past weekend where we got to love in action. And I pray that that's just the start of it, that this isn't something that we just do once a year and you kind of just say, well, I did my loving in action once this year and I'm good. But that will kind of be what Rising Church is marked by. And so one of the questions I really want you guys to talk is kind of towards the end, and that's how do we express love as a church? How do we kind of foster love in our church? How do we grow love in our church? As Rising Church, how do we become more loving towards one another and towards others and towards God? And so just to kind of kick things off for you, hopefully this will be something that will kind of stir the pot a little bit as you guys prepare to talk about this. I hope you have a great session, and next week we're coming to the end, and it's going to be a great one, so don't miss it, and we'll see you next week.